So some of you have already expressed that you're here today to learn a little bit more about executive functions, and I'm sure some of you have some really deep knowledge of this as well. So feel free to unmic and add into the conversation. I'm going to start with a would you rather, and we're going to do a waterfall for this activity. So the waterfall means hold on to your thinking until you hear me say 3, 2, 1, waterfall, and then it should be in the chat, but you haven't pressed send, and then we'll see what everybody's responses is. So the would you rather. Imagine you are a math student in Mr. Belcher's class, and Mr. Belcher likes to get started right away. So as you walk into the classroom, he is going to let you know what materials you will need for today's class. So I'm going to give you 3 different variations on how he shares this information with you. And you're just going to write in the chat option A, option B, or option C. You can just write A, B, or C if you want. And you have to choose one. You can't choose a combination. Okay, so option A. You walk in and he just tells you, okay, everybody, you need a protractor, a ruler, 2 markers, and 3D objects. That's option A. Option B. This is written on the whiteboard as you walk in. And option C, this is projected onto the screen. This is only thing projected onto the screen. Okay, so do some thinking there for a moment. A, B, or C, get it in the chat, but don't press send yet. And we're gonna do a waterfall. So 3, 2, 1, waterfall. All right, so it looks like the majority of you are C's with a couple B's. Nobody likes A whatsoever. So can somebody from the B's maybe just explain to me what is it about B that you like or that resonates with you?
I can go. I like that it's written and I can read it and see it. So for me, like, I know I need to be able to almost like tick those things off as I go. So a nice organized list is what I want.
Thank you, Caitlin. I'm with you. I think we're linear thinkers. How about C? Lots of you said C. What was it about C that you liked?
I think I took it on as like a student's view, and for a lot of my students, they struggle with reading to begin with, and so it takes them a long time to process what each of those things are and then get it out and then have that feeling of being prepared. Where just seeing it, I know I don't have to do that reading part.
Right. Awesome. So this is kind of our entry point into an introduction to executive functioning today. We are going to revisit executive functioning, digging deeper into the components of it over the next few sessions. I think over the next like 8 sessions. So today is just kind of an overview introduction to it. And so as you're looking at this, ideally what we would want to meet the needs of all students in the classroom is for all 3 to be happening. So to have something that looks like this, you've got the list, but beside the word is also the visual. And you would also be saying it aloud to the students as they're walking in, and even better, pointing to it as you're saying to it. We're going to come back to that. I'm going to show you a video right now that kind of explains what we're talking about when we're talking about executive functions. So fingers crossed, all volumes work.
Do you have students who struggle to organize their time and their school materials?
Who have difficulty staying on task or knowing when to ask for help? Who often procrastinate or struggle to transition to new activities and environments? Who act impulsively and have difficulty regulating their emotions? If so, they are probably struggling with their executive functions. Executive functions are the many different cognitive processes that students use to control their behavior and connect past experience to present action. They include skills such as working memory, task initiation, organization, planning, self-monitoring, cognitive flexibility, emotional control, and impulse control, among others. These cognitive processes are housed in the area of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is located behind the forehead. Neuroscience has taught us that the brain develops from back to front, so the executive functions develop gradually throughout childhood and adolescence, and typically reach maturity by the age of 25. Students with learning disabilities often struggle with executive functions, which can exacerbate the difficulties they already experience at school. That is why it is crucial that educators understand these skills and how to support students in developing them. LD at School has a wide range of educator resources on this topic, including the online learning module and in-depth look at executive functions. For more information, visit ldatschool.ca.
For those of you who are not familiar with that website, it is a phenomenal website for you to dig into any of these things that we're talking about. Okay, so looking, oh, there we go, I think we're back. Looking at, this is what constitutes the executive functions. So the executive functioning is like the CEO of your brain. So it's a collection of all these brain processes that guide your thoughts and behaviors. And they're located primarily in the prefrontal cortex. And the thing about that is your brain actually develops from the back of your brain to the front of your brain. So this is like the last thing to actually get developed by students or by anybody as their brain is developing. So I'm going to put a Jamboard link in the chat, and I want you just to think back. And if you didn't teach math today, I want you to think back to the last time you did a math lesson. And I want you to think about, for that math lesson, what structures, routines, norms, activities, tasks would be difficult for a student with executive function struggles. So just think about that. I'm going to put a link in the chat. I want you to go to that Jamboard and just start throwing some stuff on that Jamboard. And the question is on the Jamboard as well. Okay, just finish up your last thoughts there. Clearly have the skilled group with us today because these are amazing. And just looking at this Jamboard makes me realize how many barriers are already in place before we've even introduced math to these students who might be struggling from all or even some of these executive functioning skills. So thank you for sharing this, and thank you for reflecting and thinking about it. What our goal is to look at some of these ideas and come up with some solutions. And this is going to be over the course of the year. We're not solving all of this today, but it's also great for you to take a moment and look at this and think, how could you do some of these things just a little bit different, just to make it that much easier for students who are already struggling. Okay, so looking at executive functioning skills. So you've already nailed it. Executive functioning skills allow us to demonstrate situational awareness or read the room. So reading the room is a very early aspect of executive functioning. And what it basically means is they're recognizing zones in the room. They recognize space, time, objects, people. They're walking in and they're saying, okay, what do I need to do? What is expected of me in this setting? It sometimes involves self-directed observations. So like what's happening now, what matters now. It uses if-then thinking. So if this is what it looks like, then what do I need to do? So I know you're already thinking about those students who are walking in and not reading the room, like that student who walks in late and totally disrupts the class, and students who don't seem to learn from repeated experience are probably struggling with some form of executive functioning. It also allows us to predict possible outcomes and recall past experiences. So that predictability is pretty big when it comes to helping out students understand what this looks like. So when you can create a math classroom that has like a predictable structure to it, with flexibility involved in that, because we know we're not going back to like the traditional days where we've outlined, I'm teaching, you're doing the homework, and we'll take up the homework tomorrow. But there are ways within a flexible environment to create predictable structures. It allows us to generate a plan to achieve that outcome. It allows us to initiate appropriate actions or responses to achieve the desired outcome. It allows us to monitor in an ongoing manner the success or failure of one's behavior. And it allows us to modify performance based on self-monitoring and situational awareness of expected and unexpected outcomes, and then also shift flexibly between activities. So that is a lot that is happening behind the scenes for us that we're not even aware is happening, that some students have yet to develop. So some students may present to you as disengaged, or they may exhibit some undesirable behaviors, like they might be oppositional, or they might be off task, or they're talking out of turn. They are not trying to be a jerk. It's tempting for us to label these students as like the behavior kid, or, oh, I've got this kid in my class again. But their behavior is not who they are. They probably have a skills deficit in executive functioning and actually require more of your support. So looking at some stats here, here's a little Venn diagram. This is taken, these percentages represent the total of all students under the age of 18 globally. So what you might be able to recognize there is 20% of the students who have executive functioning deficits also have a math learning disorder. So not only is the environment and the world around them causing barriers, but the math itself is causing barriers. So many students, both with and without LDs, will experience difficulties with executive functioning skills. And it is important to note that not all students with LDs necessarily struggle with executive functionings. Also, students who struggle with executive functions with LDs or not might not necessarily struggle with all aspects of their executive functioning. So these are not just students with an IEP. There's many students in your classrooms that do not have a formal diagnosis and also potentially struggle with these aspects of their learning just because it has not developed. But like the video said, the good news is you can learn executive functioning skills. You don't come with them already innately created. Okay, so looking at, here they are again, the components of our executive functioning skills. There is a very interesting research fact that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, by definition, involves difficulties in executive functioning. So the symptoms of ADHD are intricately linked to the various executive functioning skills. So for example, kids that have difficulty sustaining attention, difficulty following through on directions, failure to complete work, they're losing things, they have difficulty organizing, they're blurting out answers, difficulty waiting for one's turn, are all directly related to the executive functioning skills. And indeed, experts on ADHD have found that these skills develop more slowly in individuals with an ADHD diagnosis, with the developmental lag being about 5 years in adults with ADHD. And Lene shared a really great fact that she learned from, I believe it was her spec ed consultant, that you basically take a third off of their chronological age. So if we have a student who is 12 years old, think about them as if they are 8 years old. Was that accurate, Lene? Just give me a thumbs up if I nailed that one. Yeah. So that's a very helpful fact to think about when you're dealing with these types of students, especially in the intermediate grades, because we do have a high expectation of them being independent learners. And to be able to think like, oh, if they're having struggles with these, I need to think that maybe like they're like a grade 4 student right now. And what would I do if this was a grade 4 student? How would I help this student? How would I support them? Instead of looking at it as a behavior issue. Okay, which leads us to a really great quote here. When we only look at behavior, we stop seeing the child and only look with an intent to judge whether we need to reward or punish. When we look beyond the behavior, we see a struggling human who needs our help with something. So just something to keep in mind. So we are going to be, like I said, looking at some strategies at how we can help students develop their executive functioning skills. And today we're going to look at one strategy, which is using visuals. So thinking about that would you rather and what that could look like. So again, I'm just going to show you a video here. So I will mute I'll mute now before I start.
We use visuals every day. Icons, traffic signs, calendars, clocks, maps, recipes, grocery lists, and more. For students, visuals provide a form of communication that lasts much longer than spoken language. Examples include visual schedules, time timers, scripted routines, checklists, and visual reminders. Visuals literally help your students see what you mean. For students who are visual thinkers, have language processing delays, are easily distracted, anxious, or English language learners, visuals provide comfort, predictability, and access to the same information as their peers. People often think it is helpful to repeat instructions and provide verbal prompts, but more words can simply mean more language to process. Imagine getting to a vending machine and the visuals have been removed. Don't worry, Vinny will tell you everything you need to know.
Nachos, chips, cookies, Smarties, M&Ms, coffee, crisp, Babe Ruth.
What if the visuals on your phone were removed and replaced with someone to remind you of everything verbally?
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, email, weather, calendar. Oh, you have one appointment today.
Suppose we removed all visuals from your recipe book. Fortunately, we have your mother-in-law on standby.
Put the ground beef, onion, and oil in a frying pan. Stir to break up the meat as it browns.
We all need visuals in our life. Using more visuals throughout the day will help all students. Visuals encourage independence and inclusion. They reduce anxiety and frustration. They support self-regulation and universal design for learning. Visuals, a simple, convenient alternative to repeating yourself all day.
Yay!
Visuals. I see what you mean.
Okay, so just thinking about that, we have worked very hard over the last few years in math to get us using more visuals in the actual learning of math. But on top of the instruction that you're doing in math, there's also some very simple strategies just around the agenda, and even having like an agenda, and not the whole day agenda, but what is this hour of math going to look like? And we talked last session about these icons that are being used in grade 9 math that were created by our spec ed department to help signify to students when you're going to be working independently, when you're going to be working collaboratively, when I'm going to be just talking to you. So even just drawing something simple on the board that the students become accustomed to, I've included the Google slide deck for these images that you are welcome to use, would help make some consistency between elementary and into secondary. But then also just like visual pictures, like open your Chromebook. Maybe you can have, if it's something that you're projecting, it's pretty easy to copy a picture of a Chromebook. If it's something you're writing on your whiteboard, you maybe just want to do a quick drawing of a Chromebook. You're going to need pencils. So back to that whole idea of what is it that you're going to need. And another really great strategy is to have a midpoint check-in throughout the math class, maybe even a couple midpoint check-ins. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So of course, we all are aware, good for all, essential for some is the key here. I'm going to talk about the midpoint check-ins when we get into social emotional learning. But our final note for today is strategy 1 for helping with executive functioning. Make it really easy. Use visuals, as many visuals as you can possibly get, and connect it to the words if possible, and your verbal. A great strategy that some of our grade 9 teachers use, a little tricky right now during COVID, understand that, but when we get back to normal times, or if you do have a spare flat surface in your class, they'll create a model desk where they'll put, the desk is right by the door, and they'll put the materials that the students need on that desk, like lay it out like this, and then the students know they have to go get those materials for their own desk. Again, the use of visuals with instructions, so that would you rather we did earlier, the use of visuals with agendas, and anytime you're telling them I'm giving you 15 minutes to work on it, make that timer visible. So that was it for executive functioning for today.